It was supposed to be my sanctuary. I found myself standing there, shaking the keys to my beach house in my hand, and staring at the edifice. Thinking about that was the only thing I could bring myself to do. I constructed the house with the intention of it serving as a sanctuary for myself. On the other hand, when I returned to it today, it had undergone significant changes since the last time I had left it. Megan's words, which were suffused with rancor and delivered in a powerful tone, emanated from the open door. "Why is that old parasite here? We have no room for you." I was no longer capable of moving my body. What is the name that she just yelled out to me? Parasite. An overview. I was overcome by a constricting sensation in my chest. I found myself at the entrance to my own house, looking at my daughter-in-law Megan, who was glaring at me with a look of pure contempt. I had arrived early since I was looking forward to spending some time by myself and enjoying some peace and quiet. I was confronted with chaos instead. I was no longer the individual in possession of the house. I had changed. Her mother, her sister, and at least a dozen other people who were strangers to me had taken over the establishment. My driveway was littered with odd vehicles that were parked. The living room was blaring obnoxiously loud music, and the air was filled with the fragrance of prepared food, which assaulted my senses. While they were on the deck, the kids were playing with soccer balls, and as a result, they ended up hitting the red geranium pots that I had been cultivating with a great deal of attention and care over the period of many years. These days, the grass has been entirely trampled down, but in the past, I used to get a great deal of satisfaction from mowing it every Saturday and Sunday. The yard was littered with a large number of abandoned aluminum cans of beer. The chairs of the wicker furniture that I had put a great deal of time and energy into getting the year before had been entirely covered in the garments and towels that were both moist and unclean. It was quite upsetting to witness the transformation of my stunning garden, which I take a great deal of pleasure in, become a battle zone due to a party that had spiraled out of control. I was unable to move from the position where I was standing, because I did not possess the ability to completely understand the scenario as it was unfolding. Megan flashed me a nasty grin and gave me a frigid gaze the moment our eyes first met. She was wearing one of my favorite aprons in the entryway. I myself manually completed the hand stitching of that exact item 10 years ago. When I was preparing meals for my family, I always wore the one that she ended up wearing. It was as if it were a crown placed upon her. It served as a reminder of my place. Subordinate, forgotten, and unwelcome. I made an effort to keep my voice even as I said, "Megan, I had no idea that you were here," in an attempt to conceal the shock that was coursing through my body. But shock was not the only feeling that was experienced. There were others. It was regarded as an act of treachery. In a basic and easily digestible manner I continued speaking, and my voice cracked slightly as I said, "This is my home. For 20 years, I have been coming here every holiday weekend." She began to laugh in an abrupt and unstoppable manner. The moment as I became aware of the noise, my stomach turned over on itself. It was laughter that did not originate from a place of enjoyment. It was lacking in civilization as well as humanity. That is absurd. She burst into laughter and responded with, "Oh please. Robert told me we could use the house as long as we wanted. Besides, we're actually doing something productive here. You just come to complain and interrupt our family plans." Veronica, her sister, her two teenagers, and then Megan's mother, who looked at me as if I were an intruder in my own home, were the individuals that began to appear behind her. I made my way over to the railing and discovered that there was a man there who was smoking a cigarette. He smoked as though he had a great interest in the establishment, but I did not recognize him. It seemed as if each and every one of them had come with the purpose of becoming the owner of something that had never been theirs to start with. The exact identical expression of anger and vexation was sent to me by each and every one of them in response. The look of utter disbelief that appeared on my face as I stood in this particular place, which I must say was really brave of me to do the moment I posed the inquiry, "Where is Robert?" I became immediately aware of the rapid beating of my heart in my chest. It was imperative for my son to be there at this location. He would be privy to information about the events while they were taking place. The reasons for it would be explained by him. A miscommunication of some kind may have taken place. Without attempting to even provide the semblance of an apology, Megan folded her arms across her chest. She responded with an unfriendly attitude, "Robert is working as he always is." He has actual obligations, unlike you. I did not have the capability to move from the posture that I was in. I had not anticipated that they would have as much of an influence on me as they actually did. She was not only demonstrating a lack of respect for me, but she was also ignoring all of the accomplishments that I had ever done in my life. This domicile is located in a place that is my sanctuary, which I constructed with my own 2 hands following the death of my husband. The house that I worked tirelessly on every single day to pay off, brick by brick. It was as though it were nothing more than trash that might be thrown out. This is the approach that Megan has chosen to take about the matter at the current moment. The falseness of sweetness with which her voice had been drenched did not change as she continued to speak. Look, Eleanor, there's no room for you here. The rooms are all taken. The kitchen is being used to prepare food for the whole family. And honestly, your presence will only create unnecessary tension. The world came to a dead stop. I was overtaken with a feeling of weight and oppression as a result of the circumstances surrounding me in my immediate vicinity. She was practically compelling me to abandon the house that I own. The house that I constructed, into which I had devoted a significant amount of my time, labor, and energy. There was a great deal more involved in this case than a simple misunderstanding could possibly explain. This was an incursion into land that belonged to another country. A proposal to take over the management of a business. With her back turned toward the door and her posture exuding self-assurance, Megan was at the forefront of the charge, giving the impression that she was the owner of the residence. I could sense the warmth that accompanied the flow of blood as it began to pour through my cheeks, turning my face a shade of red. Despite the fact that my hands had curled into fists, I did not utter a single word. There was no way at all for me to achieve that. I was aware that showing any indication of weakness, or saying anything, would determine the outcome of my situation. Megan had previously emerged victorious in the tournament prior to this. All of my possessions had been taken into her possession previous to that point in time. My retreat from the world, my self-worth, the calmness of my thinking regardless. I had every intention of putting up a fight before I allowed her to emerge victorious. After a short pause, I continued, "This house is something that I paid for in full." My voice had a weaker quality than I would have liked it to, despite the fact that it had returned. "I have the documents. I pay the bills. This is my house." "Oh, that's enough out of you," Megan said in an interrupting manner with a sneer on her face that was sarcastic. "Always the same thing with you, Eleanor. How it's yours, how you pay. Robert is your son, isn't he? That's how normal families work. What's yours is his, and what's his is mine." The humiliation that I was experiencing was so extreme that it felt as though a fire were burning in the very depths of my chest. I was a stranger within the walls of my own home. I was being evaluated by individuals who had no awareness of the years of effort that had been invested in building this life. I was the one who constructed this location. At the time, Robert was only a young child. After my spouse had passed away, I was on my own and found myself in the position of fighting to generate enough money to make ends meet. I put all of my energy into it. I didn't hold anything back. The phrases that Megan used to try to deprive me of that source of power were dripping with condescension. I was on the verge of speaking once again, but the opportunity to do so did not offer itself to me. Megan's sister approached her and drew closer to her, becoming one of the teens present there. When she looked me up and down, her expression was contorted into a sneer. Rolling her eyes, she posed a question. "Why don't you just go and stay somewhere like a hotel instead? My aunt is right. There's no room for you here," he stated in response. I twisted my body away in an effort to try to get rid of the lump that had formed in my throat. It was not important at all. It didn't matter in the slightest. They had the conviction that they had emerged victorious from the crisis. They, on the other hand, had not done this. I was unable to keep a straight face, in spite of the fact that the glitter in my eyes did not make its way to my smile. "It's fine, dear. I understand perfectly." It was Megan's belief that she had emerged victorious in the circumstance, and her smile confirmed that this was what she was thinking. Unaware of the fact that she had just committed the most significant error of her whole life, she continued on her walk. My thoughts were going in every direction while I was walking away from my place of residence. I had to put a great deal of effort into achieving this objective. Every single concession that had been made, every scrap of fabric, And all of the hours that had been devoted to working on the sewing machine throughout the nighttime had been leading up to this very moment. This place of residence, my sweet home, I was now going to be deprived of the very thing that I had in my grasp. They had, on the other hand, made an error of a large magnitude. Their perception was that I was an elderly female individual who they could simply disregard. The idea that I possessed the capability to carry out those specific behaviors was utterly unfamiliar to them. They would acquire an understanding of the situation the following day. Every single phrase that they had uttered would cause them to feel regretful, if I were in their position. This wasn't over. As I walked away from my home, the only place where I had ever felt a genuine feeling of peace and contentment, the concept continued to linger in my thoughts. Megan was under the impression that she had come out on top in the situation, but she did not have the faintest inkling as to the type of woman she was working with. I still had a great deal to achieve at the time. During my stay at the Golden Sands Hotel, I was unable to stop thinking about all of the events that had occurred recently. My thoughts were constantly going in circles. I was suffering from insomnia. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Megan's face peering back at me with a mocking smirk. The words parasite, which I could hear echoing in my ears, produced a cold fury within me that eventually fueled a burning drive to succeed. Overnight, I devised a strategy to address the situation. The intrusion that Megan made into my personal space was far less concerning than the invasion that she committed against my home. The most terrifying aspect of the scenario was the knowledge that this was not a random act of disrespect, but rather something more serious than that. After careful consideration, this decision was made with deliberation and was not made hastily or without thought. For quite a long time, Megan and Robert had been carrying on with their lives, looking forward to the arrival of this particular occasion. The use of the house as a location for family holidays was not in any way connected to this. No, they were attempting to take away something that I had put together with my own two hands from me. My residence is the one that they wished to take possession of. Whatever it was that I had been working toward my entire life was what they desired. They, on the other hand, have not failed to take my capabilities into account. The following morning I drove to the bank. Despite the fact that my thoughts were racing at a quick pace inside my head, my hands remained immobile and did not shake in the slightest. I was fully aware that I needed to take action without delay. I had to defend my property by fighting back within the bounds of the law. That objective could only be accomplished in that manner. For years, I had been putting aside every single penny, and now the time had come to use that money to safeguard my hard-earned income from being taken away by those who intended to take it from me. I felt a sense of total and complete tranquility rush over me as I took my seat at the table across from Alex Peterson, the bank manager who had been familiar with me for many years. He requested that she provide him with further information regarding the manner in which she would like for him to be of assistance to her that day. His speech was always consistent with the same high standard of professionalism. My voice remained consistent as I continued to explain. I need to prevent any third parties from gaining access to my accounts, so I have to freeze any attempts. And I need an official letter from the bank confirming my mental capacity to manage my finances. The fact that he raised one of his eyebrows is indication of the fact that he had certain reservations regarding the request that I had submitted. Are you sure, Mrs. Crawford? Is everything okay? Everything is fine, I answered, despite my skepticism over the truthfulness of the assertion. But I'm in a situation where I need to protect myself. I have to make sure that my assets are secure. I was aware of the impact that my manner of speaking had, and Alex acknowledged this with a nod of his head. Of course. I'll take care of everything right away. I took a step back and went to sit down in my chair, allowing myself a moment to really take in the gravity of the situation while he was working on my request. I have been exerting a great deal of effort throughout my life in order to accomplish my goals and to construct something from the ground up. At this particular moment, my own son and his wife were making an effort to take it away from me. I was not going to remain silent in the face of that situation in any way, shape, or form. I experienced a small surge of solace when Alex delivered to me the official letter that demonstrated my mental capacity and also froze my accounts. The first step and only the first step had been taken at that point in time. In any case, it was a measure taken that moved things closer to the path of action that was most suitable. My heart was filled with a feeling of determination when I departed from the bank. The office of a legal counsel was the subsequent venue that I paid a visit to. I made up my mind earlier that morning to call them and give them a phone call. I urgently needed someone to guide me through this difficult situation and to ensure that my rights were safeguarded. The name that I was given as a possible lawyer for myself is Thomas Gallagher. In every regard, the professionalism and sophistication of his office were precisely what I required them to be. Due to the fact that I had heard numerous positive remarks regarding him, the moment that I stepped into his office, I was absolutely convinced that the decision to choose him had been the right one. "Mrs. Crawford," he said as I was sitting on the opposite side of the table from him, "please tell me everything. From the beginning." Being aware of the fact that this was going to be a lengthy story, I drew in a deep breath. Events unfolded in this way, and that is what happened. I investigated every aspect of the situation, including the fact that Megan and Robert had been working together on fraudulent paperwork without my knowledge, the intrusion into my home without permission, the disappearance of my jewels, and the destruction of my property. While he was listening, Thomas paid close attention and wrote down extensive notes. I could plainly see the gears spinning in his head as he pondered over the facts that had been presented to him. Throughout the whole time, he never once looked away from me. When I had done, he gave me his whole attention. His gaze was steadfast and professional. "Your case is solid. Very solid," he began to say in a slow, sleepy voice. He referred to her as Mrs. Crawford. "You have trespassing, robbery, falsification of documents, attempted asset fraud, and possibly medical corruption. Your family has gotten themselves into quite a mess." The effect that his remarks had on me was similar to that of having a bucket of ice-cold water poured over my head. I had a hunch that something was off, but laying everything up in such a manner made it seem as though it was actually going place. Megan and Robert reached a point at which there was no going back when they crossed a certain threshold. I asked, maintaining the evenness of my tone in spite of the fact that my feelings were in complete turmoil, "What are our options with respect to this predicament?" Thomas found that he couldn't help but smile. It came as effortlessly to him as breathing. "Several things. First, we file for an immediate eviction lawsuit for illegal trespassing. Second, we report the theft of your jewelry to the police. Third, we report the falsification of medical documents to the medical board and the district attorney's office. And fourth, we request a restraining order to prevent them from continuing to fraudulently use your name." I gave a nod of my head in response to it. "How long will all that take?" Thomas emphasized that the judge has the power to order an immediate eviction if there is any evidence that irrefutably demonstrates that trespassing has taken place. In cases like this, the law acts quickly. The rest will take time, but it's all very clear. We have everything we need to prove their wrongdoing. I had a notion of the response that I was going to receive, but I wanted to hear it from the person themselves. Consequently, I said, "And how much will it cost?" "The grand total that I request in exchange for the whole procedure is $5,000. Thomas responded in response. I didn't waste any time at all. "I can pay it today." His smile became broader and broader as time went on. "I like working with clients who take their legal defense seriously," I emphatically proclaimed with unwavering certainty. "At this moment, I am not going to abandon my efforts. For the past 70 years, I have been preparing to defend myself against the world." Thomas gave a small nod of his head. "Excellent attitude. But there's one important thing I need to ask you, Mrs. Crawford. Are you willing to take this all the way? Because once we start this process, your relationship with your son will probably be irreparable." I took a brief stop. For a particular period of time, he was of the opinion that his perspectives were given a great deal of consideration. This was no longer an issue that only affected the house. It was now a problem that went beyond it. As far as my youngster was concerned, this was relevant. The man who had taken out a promissory note indicating that he would always keep an eye on me, the son that I had reared, I was careful to maintain eye contact with Thomas at all times. He's already made his choice. He chose Megan. He chose money. He chose everything except me. Thomas gave a nod that was filled with deference and respect, indicating his acknowledgement and appreciation. "Understood. We will proceed with everything. First thing in the morning, we'll file all the lawsuits." I can tell with complete confidence that I had received a newfound sense of purpose after leaving his office that day. The problem that I was facing was not just a straightforward question of regaining possession of my home. The most important thing was fighting for my dignity, fighting for justice, and, above all things, fighting for that which was rightfully mine. I woke up early the following morning. I didn't have any time off to do anything else. I knew that Megan and Robert would attempt to mount a resistance, so I was prepared for the possibility of that happening. Not only did I have the documents and evidence, I also have the law working in my favor. While I was preparing for the day that lay ahead of me, I found myself reflecting on all of the years that I had spent building up the life that I have at the moment. My own flesh and blood were attempting to deprive me of everything at this moment. They were trying to take away the tears that I had cried, the sacrifices that I had made, and the countless hours I had spent working at the sewing machine. Regardless, I was not going to allow any one of them to do anything of the sort. This conflict involved many more important problems than just one single house. I fought to protect my legacy in this struggle. I was prepared to participate in warfare as well. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. We were in conflict with one another. I was ready and waiting to enter into combat. The very first thing that needed to be done was to check and make sure that everyone was making forward development in every regard. All of the documentation that were needed had already been provided to my lawyer, Thomas Gallagher, by the time that the morning rolled around. Due to the fact that his office was furnished with all of the essential items required to initiate the legal processes, I had a feeling of subdued self-assurance. At this point, it was no longer a question of simply gaining ownership of my home. It was a matter of preserving all that I had put my efforts into and everything that was mine. It was my impression that Megan and Robert believed that they were capable of terrifying me to the point that I would give in. They made the enormous mistake of underestimating me because they thought that I was nothing more than a fragile old woman who would lack the ability to stand up to them and would give up when they employed intimidation against me. Despite what the circumstances may have been, they were operating under the assumption that the facts were incorrect. I have put forth a great deal of strenuous labor over the course of many decades to transform nothing into something. I was not going to let them take it away from me without putting up a fight first. I got a phone call from Thomas at around 9 o'clock in the morning. Mrs. Crawford, we're moving forward with the eviction process today. The judge is reviewing the evidence, and we should have an immediate ruling by the end of the day. I had a sense of comfort and reassurance as a result of the sound of his voice, which was composed and professional. All of the elements were progressing in accordance with the schedule and the plan that had been drawn up in advance. I, on the other hand, did not possess the capability to simply wait and see how things unfolded. My presence was really necessary. I had to be there in person. It was imperative for me to take care of this issue, which entailed stepping up and handling things on my own. I traveled to the beach home with the resoluteness of a person who has exhausted all of the possibilities accessible to them. I was able to recall all of the events that took place yesterday with a high level of clarity. I vividly remember the feelings of confusion, the lack of respect, and the sensation of degradation as if they happened just yesterday. Megan and her entire family, all of whom are treating me as like I were an unwanted visitor in the very house that is owned by me. In my perspective, it was very necessary for me to step in and address that situation. I noticed that nothing had been touched and that the entire place was still in a complete state of disarray the moment that I arrived at the house and parked in the driveway. It seemed like there were people inside the house since I was able to hear what sounded like laughter and conversations coming from within. In addition, the front door was wide open. The air continued to be saturated with the perfume of the burned food, reminding me at all times of the irreverence that had been directed toward me. I did not plan to stick around until after the police officers had arrived at the site. I had no intention of allowing them to believe that they held a position of power. I stepped into my house, fully disregarding the looks of shock and irritation on the faces of the members of Megan's family. Megan was seated on the couch and talking on the phone as I was approaching. She was not aware of the fact that I was there. Her mother was sitting next to her looking uncomfortable, and her sister was running around frantically attempting to organize the mess that they had made. Well, I muttered with a low voice. I had not employed this in a long time, but I maintained my composure while I spoke with an authoritative tone. It looks like the invaders have settled in nicely. Megan suddenly jerked her head up, and her face turned a bright red as a result of her anger. She terminated the call that she was on over the telephone and immediately rose to her feet. With a tone of voice that was dripping with hostility, she inquired, "What is the reason that you have come to this place?" I responded to the individual, keeping my gaze fixed on theirs. "I have come to make sure that you and your family understand everything that is taking place. This is my residence, I was informed, and you are not welcome here," I was further told in response. Despite the fact that Megan was attempting to keep her composure, I could still perceive the terror in her eyes. She was accustomed to having the ability to obtain any object that she desired. However, that is no longer the case. Her voice quivered slightly as she addressed Megan, saying, "I don't think you have any idea what's going on here. We have every right to be here. This house is Robert's. It is his property now." I moved my head forward and backward to the left and to the right. "You're wrong. Robert doesn't have the right to give you permission to invade my home. This is my house. And you're trespassing." I saw Thomas as he was driving up to the door of the house. He made it there before she had the opportunity to respond with anything. Behind him, I could make out a police car and a notary public. The official documents had already been created and were ready to be used in the eviction process. The moment that Megan became aware of the fact that the legal team was approaching her, the color drained instantly from her face. "This is absolutely preposterous," Megan said out loud. "You have no right to do something like this to us." The police officer and the notary public were not far behind Thomas when he made his entrance into the room. He was in the process of doing it when the door swung open. Thomas greeted the other individual in a professional and forceful manner with the words, "Good morning. I am Thomas Gallagher," he stated. "I am the legal representative for Mrs. Eleanor Crawford. We are in possession of an eviction order for trespassing, and we intend to carry it out immediately." Megan's eyes expanded to an incredible size as a result of the terror she felt. "What is this? You can't do this." She was contacted by the officer, who handed her with the legal documents notifying her of her eviction. In a tone of voice that was collected and unwavering, he posed the question, "Are there any documents in your possession that demonstrate that you are entitled to be in this place?" When Megan spoke, her voice conveyed a feeling of uncertainty. "My husband." The cops went up to the woman and asked, "Where is your husband, ma'am?" when they interrupted her. Megan said with a look of apparent embarrassment on her face as she delivered the words, "Robert is currently present at his location of employment. It is not until he arrives that you are legally permitted to be present here," the officer said as he turned to address the notary. He then added, "Carry on with the procedure of delivering the eviction notice." The police officer stepped in before Megan's mother had the opportunity to launch a counterattack. "Ma'am, if you continue to disrupt the legal process, we'll have to ask you to leave as well." As events were taking place, the notary proceeded to write down observations, keeping track of everything that happened. I knew that Megan was concocting a scheme in her head, but it was too late to interfere before she carried out her plan. They had taken action on the matter, and at this point in time, the adverse effects of their activities were beginning to manifest themselves. "Megan, this is not just an issue about the house," I began, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "You and Robert have attempted to take my life's work away from me by lying, manipulating, and committing fraud. You thought that you would be able to get away with it, but you were mistaken." Megan continued to maintain the same position as before. She was so taken aback by what had happened that she did not know what to say. I went on to say, "The things that you do will have repercussions. And now you'll have to face them." Robert arrived on the scene at that exact same instant in time. I observed him drive his car up to the driveway and park it in there. It appeared as though he was feeling both humiliated and puzzled at the same moment. The moment that he exited his vehicle, I became immediately cognizant of the fact that the level of tension was rising. This very second was that specific second, the exact moment in time at when everything would become utterly and completely disorganized. With a voice that was quivering as he addressed his mother, Robert whispered, "Mom, what's going on? Why are the police here?" Megan leaned down and whispered something into Robert's ear, then promptly took steps to intercede in the situation that was unfolding. Her eyes expressed a sense of desperation that I could sense in my own body. He had not approached her to demand answers in the manner that he had done numerous times before. It had been a significant amount of time since he had done so. His gaze was directed toward me with his eyes, At that same moment, I was able to detect a glimmer of recognition in his eyes. I made certain to keep my voice even and measured as I delivered my speech to Robert. I said that you need to understand something. Megan has attempted to take my house from me, and she has done so by lying and using fake documents. You have been complicit in this. The color that was in Robert's face became substantially more pale. He flashed a look in Megan's direction, but she turned her head away from him, and her lips were quivering. After a long time, he was finally beginning to reach a point where he accepted the reality of the circumstances. In a whisper, he questioned whether or not this was the case. I gave a nod of my head in response to it. Yes, Robert. It's true. And now I'm taking action. This isn't just about the house. This is about everything I've worked for. Everything I've sacrificed for you and for this family. Megan stopped Robert before he was able to utter a single word because she prevented him from saying anything the instant that he opened his lips to speak. That is not what you believe at all. She began to talk, her voice growing louder. All we are trying to do is ensure that we have a future. This house was going to be Robert's anyway, so what difference does it make? My voice does not waver in the slightest as I proclaim. I am convinced that it creates a substantial impact in every respect. You don't get to take what's mine just because you feel entitled to it. The quiet that descended after that was oppressive to the point of being nearly unbearable. Robert remained in a state of confusion and was utterly incapable of articulating any words. This was due to the burden that he had self-imposed, which was weighing down on him like an enormous stone. On the other hand, Megan still had a significant amount of time until she could consider herself to have completed everything. Eleanor, you are committing an enormous blunder, she declared loudly. You are going to come to regret this. I waited but did not receive a response. Every subject of conversation had been exhausted. Because the matter had progressed to the stage at where the opposing side had already initiated legal action, I had no intention of caving in to their demands. Thomas made his way to the front of the room, exuding a commanding vocal presence as he went. We'll be filing the formal complaint today, and the stolen jewelry will be reported to the police. As for the fraudulent documents, we'll be contacting the medical board and district attorney. This will be handled properly. The moment that the police officer gave Megan the eviction papers, her face immediately twisted into an expression that was the very definition of fury. However, there was no method by which it could be avoided in any manner. It was taking place at that time. This time, I was adamant about not caving in or retreating from the situation. After then, the days that followed were a chaotic whirlwind of phone conversations with Thomas Gallagher, constant tension, and a lot of legal paperwork to deal with. My home was no longer simply a place to live. It was much more than that. Fighting was a common occurrence at that location. Both Megan and Robert were in a state of confusion and agitation, as they tried to salvage what they could of the things that they had left. In spite of that, there was no possible way to undo any of the damage that they had inflicted. The individual was removed in a manner that was efficient and took only a short amount of time. Megan and her family were evicted from my property at the end of the week after the judge made a decision in my favor. Winning was a pleasurable sensation, but it was also an unpleasant feeling to the exact same degree at the exact same moment. Even though I had regained ownership of the house, the emotional repercussions that arose from the entire ordeal continued to cast a cloud over me. I did not notice that. I didn't feel victorious in the slightest. I experienced something significantly more profound instead. I perceived a feeling of non-existence. The place that had been the recipient of my affection and hard work for so many years had now become a symbol of betrayal. The truth that my own child had chosen to reject me by practically turning his back on me was something that I was completely at a loss to know how to interpret. After the eviction occurred, Robert made multiple attempts to get in touch with the opposing party. He called me on the phone, sent me texts, and on one occasion he even showed up at my home. I, on the other hand, lacked the self-assurance to confront him. Then, how would I go about fulfilling this goal that I have set for myself? What could possibly make me look at the man I reared, the child I soothed when he was unwell, or the young man who pledged that he would always have my back? How could I ever do it when I found out that he was involved in the conspiracy to take everything away from me? Out of nowhere, the telephone began to ring abruptly one morning. I did not have the phone number, but as soon as I noticed the call, I got a strong intuition that I should answer it immediately. I asked, "Hello." My heartbeat was hammering like a drum, but I maintained a voice that was level and collected. Robert looked across at Eleanor and remarked, "That's me. I need to talk to you about something." I remained in my seat at that location for a brief period of time, not knowing what I should say. After everything that had happened between the two of us, how was it possible that I could look at him again? "What is it that you desire, Robert?" I inquired. I made a conscious effort to maintain the evenness in my voice. "I have spent a significant amount of time giving this a lot of thought," he added, and the emotions of tension that he was experiencing were made evident by the tone of voice that he used. "I'm sorry. I should have never let this happen. I was wrong. I betrayed you. And I don't know how to fix it, but I want to try." It felt as though I had been stabbed the moment that he made those comments. I desired to put all of my heart into trusting him more than anything else. I wanted to maintain the belief that he had taken those actions based on a genuine understanding of their gravity. On the other hand, there is another part of me, the part that was so profoundly injured in the past, that is not at all certain that I would ever be able to repose my trust in him again. With a low tone of voice, I stated, "Robert, I'm not convinced that you'll be able to fix this. You've already made your choice. You sided with her. And now everything has changed." For a brief spell, he remained completely silent, not uttering even one word. I was able to discern the sound of his breathing, which made it very clear that he was having a difficult time finding the right words to express himself. He pleaded, "Please, Mom," with desperation in his voice which cracked as he spoke. "Please just give me a chance. I've realized what I did. I've ruined everything." In an effort to keep myself from breaking down and crying, I closed my eyes. "You've ruined more than just everything, Robert. You've ruined us." I was able to hear him draw in a deep breath at the other end of the telephone line. He made a quiet declaration stating, "I am in possession of the knowledge of that particular fact. I know and I apologize. I just don't know what to do to fix it." Even though I grasped the seriousness of what he had said, I was not confident that I could trust him at all. Is there any possibility, under any circumstances, that I might retrieve the trust that I have placed in my own son? Is it in any way realistic to believe that I will be able to get over the things that he did to me? My voice began to quiver as I continued to speak. "I'm not even sure that it's possible to repair it. But maybe you should start by talking to Megan. Maybe you should make her understand what she did. Make her understand the damage she caused." After there had been a long break in the conversation, he eventually brought up a different topic. "I'll do whatever it takes to get the job done," he said in a hushed voice. "I promise you, Mom, that I will resolve this issue and set things back to the way they should be." It was completed not long after the telephone conversation reached its conclusion. After he had finished speaking, I sat in the silence that ensued, and I could still sense the heaviness of his words lingering in the air. Regardless of the fact that I did not have the slightest confidence that I would ever be able to trust him, I found myself pondering the question regardless of that reality. Was there any possibility that we would survive this ordeal? Or did this turn out to be the way that it ended? As time passed, the actual circumstances of the scenario started to become more and more apparent. Even though I had regained possession of the house, I did not feel the slightest sense of triumph. It gave the sense of being little more than an empty shell. I felt estranged from the place that had previously been my haven from stress. The walls appeared to reverberate with the essence of the past, with the sounds of laughter, the feeling of warmth, and the recollections of moments that were more joyful. All of stuff has disappeared at this point in time. Once that moment had come and gone, there was no chance of going back. Despite this, I was not going to allow it to determine the way in which I saw myself. There have been points in my life in which circumstances have been more dire. There have been occasions in the past when I have emerged victorious from situations that were far more dire than this one. I battled with all the power that I possess for everything that was in my possession. I was not going to let a betrayal from my own child to break me. It was necessary for me to keep pushing forward. I was in need of taking back control over my own life. Thomas called me by phone one afternoon to give me an update on how things were going. "Mrs. Crawford, I have some important news." "You said, go ahead," as you were trying to focus while sitting up taller in your chair. It was Thomas who brought up the fact that Megan and Robert had both come to an agreement over the terms of the plea deal. They're going to pay a fine of $25,000 each, do 200 hours of community service, and be placed on probation for 2 years. There will be no jail time, but they will have a permanent criminal record. I maintained my position and remained quiet after I absorbed all of the information. I had hoped that things would turn out differently, but it was a fair choice all the same. Regardless of the fact that Megan and Robert's actions did not turn out in the way that I had thought they would still be held responsible for what they had done. I made sure to maintain a calm and composed tone when I presented the question. What is your opinion regarding the medical report that is fraudulent? Thomas responded by making the statement that follows. As far as the law is concerned, it has been officially declared null and void. The doctor who signed it has been suspended by the medical board. They're facing serious consequences for that as well. A wave of relaxation washed over me as soon as I let out a quiet breath. It was a long way away from being ideal. I did not achieve the decision that I was expecting when everything came to a conclusion. It was something regardless of that fact. The issue was related to justice and equity for everyone involved. I kept my voice at a low volume as I mumbled, "Thank you, Thomas." In response, he made the statement, "I am completely confident that that is true. You've done the right thing, Mrs. Crawford. You've taken control of your life again." I leaned back in my chair and gave way to the emotions that accompany the conclusion of a chapter in my life. That procedure had not yet reached its conclusion, yet it was a sign that the initial stage of the process had reached its conclusion. Despite the fact that Megan and Robert had attempted to strip me of all I owned, they had not been able to achieve any success in their endeavors. They were unable to accomplish their goal of causing me to suffer ruin. I had been opposed to it previously. In the end, I was more successful than everyone else. I got a letter from Robert the next week. It was not a chat that took place over the telephone, but rather it was something of a different type. With great caution and slowness, I was shaking as I opened it. The following is the text of the little note discovered inside. "Mom, I hope you're doing well. Megan and I have learned our lesson. Maybe someday we can be a family again." My feelings welled up inside of me, and I stared at the letter for quite some time. The words created the appearance of lacking any substance or significance whatsoever. He might have been overpowered by emotions of remorse. It is a possibility. It is within the realm of possibility that he did not do so. Regardless of how things were, the reality of the matter was that it did not have any significance in the slightest. For the duration of my life, I have made the decision to devote myself to the development of something. I had been fighting in its defense. I was not about to allow anyone keep me from getting that. My hands did not exhibit the slightest bit of shaking as I placed the letter that I had folded on the surface of the table. There would not be any restoration of amicable relationships. The answer is no at this moment. It is a possibility that it will never occur. Robert was the individual who arrived at the decision. I had also gotten around to preparing a few of my own. I approached the glass and directed my gaze over the surface of the body of water. The cadence of the tide stayed constant, never varying as the waves crashed on the shore one after another. It was evidence of the reality that life goes on in spite of the events that had taken place. I was also prepared to move past the problem at that time. Eleanor Crawford demonstrated via her actions that a woman who has struggled for all of her assets will never be silenced, regardless of how grave the circumstances or how horrible the betrayal may be. In the end, Eleanor proved to be triumphant. It is possible that Megan and Robert had a strong belief that they possessed the potential to take away all of her belongings, but this did not come to fruition. Fully aware of the fact that her perseverance was indomitable, she rose to her full height and power and equipped herself with that knowledge. In spite of the fact that this story has a long way to go before it is finished, Eleanor leaves at the present time with her self-respect still intact. She has come to the realization that family is not exclusively defined by blood. Rather, family is defined by love, respect, and the strength of character necessary to fight for what is properly yours. If you find this article to be enjoyable, do not forget to click the like button and subscribe, so that you will be informed whenever new motivating stories of perseverance and fairness are published. You can leave a comment below this post expressing your thoughts on the course of action that Eleanor has chosen and how you would have handled the problem if you were in her position. We are grateful for your patronage as viewers, and we hope that you will continue to watch in the future.